of the midget sub was placed in the exact spot where it would be if our lake were Pearl Harbor. The only problem was one of scale.
One of the challenges of using Lake Castaic, it's a lot smaller than Pearl Harbor, and as such, we've had to cut everything by 1/3 scale.
A new challenge, building an exact scale model of the Japanese submarine. Using the surviving sub as a reference, a Hollywood design firm fabricated our 1/3 scale model.
Well, the conning tower is 4 feet tall. Your body is 6 foot diameter, outside diameter. So you've got 6 feet plus 4, and then the overall length from tip to tail on this was 79 feet, 10.5 inches. So we just rounded it up to 80 feet. Then we took those numbers and then divided them by 3 to get our 3rd scale.
Now that we had our submarine and our exact measurements, we needed to put them into their 1941 locations, this time on Lake Castaic. To do the necessary measurements, we brought in Craig Stanton, a land surveyor. Using a U.S. Navy aerial photo taken at Pearl Harbor just 10 days before the attack as a reference, Craig is able to extrapolate the sizes and positions of the ships in the Japanese aerial photo.
The famous 1010 dock.
Our preparation is done. Our test is about to begin. Day 1. The midget submodel arrives at the lake.
Guys, all we have to do is apply pressure to the front of it to kick the back end up.
This will be a test float to ensure that the model will ride low in the water.
The submarine is made of styrofoam material, so we have to be able to weight it and adjust it for the kind of photos that we want to take to replicate what happened at Pearl Harbor.
John Rodgard and Peter Sue need to be certain things are accurately portrayed.
It's going to be pretty interesting to see how it performs. The naval architect here was a little concerned. You know, we'd be filming it and snaps it too.
Oh, that would be jolly, wouldn't it?
I'm more concerned about that than you.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, ideally is to have the center of gravity and the center of buoyancy close together, so you have a free pitching moment. So
right.
when the concussion wave hits it, you know, you will have the freedom to move.
Next, the team moves to the bluff to establish the exact spot where the camera will be placed.
Nevada and Arizona, if we're looking through here, as Craig mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, with a line of sight off the foremast of the Arizona, and moving to the left, maybe what, 15 degrees, Craig? We talked about earlier?
Something like that.
To the left, and that puts it right over in the little cove area there.
Okay. Okay.
Day 2.
To the cones on the...
Using the dimensions of the battleships as reference, blue tarpaulins mark off an area representing the length and position of the USS Arizona.
Yeah, if you want to take that down there and hold that on.
To duplicate the aerial photo, we brought in a period black and white still camera. Photographer Dana Ross will use a vintage 35mm German-made Leica.
We don't know exactly what camera was used in the airplane, but judging from the photograph and what people used at the time, what was available, we think it was the Leica or another possible 35mm camera, but probably a Leica was used in the airplane.
We've also brought in digital photographer Dan Longmire. With the instant feedback of his digital camera, he can superimpose the old and the new photo.
On my computer system, I'm able to overlay a photo over the original Pearl Harbor photo. So I kind of have like a photo over one, and I'm able to match it up perfectly.
The submarine model is towed into position. Then the digital camera places the submarine in the exact location that matches the 1941 object.
Sub is dead on, so that's where we want to be, guys. If you can stop that sub.
The effect is remarkable.
It looks like the waves kind of dissipate.
Isn't that incredible? The one frame that was captured here shows the relationship in the size to our model compared to the object in the combat photograph is unnerving. It's just It's really, it's weird. I mean, it's wow.
If I look at the overlay of the photograph that I've taken today over the original Pearl Harbor photograph, it's uncanny how it matches up.
Next, Peter Sue directs the motorboat to create wakes that duplicate the complex waves produced by the torpedo blasts in the aerial photo. The result is extraordinary. The backlight on the submarine, combined with the wave action, creates an image very similar to the object seen in the aerial photo.
Oh, it was striking. I mean, it was unreal. It was like you were, if you would, back 60-some years ago at that position where the photograph was taken. It was really remarkable. I thought it was fascinating. The model, everything, the scaling was really super. I mean, I thought it was well done.
Our experiment shows that this mysterious object may be the lost fifth midget submarine. The original photograph, our recreation. Now, both together, judge for yourself. But if this fifth sub did make it into Pearl Harbor, what happened to it?
Often in history, every time you answer one question, new ones appear. One midget submarine that everyone thought was forever lost has been found. And the fifth midget submarine may have penetrated the harbor. But these are only two of the mysteries surrounding the Pearl Harbor attack. Others remain.
For example, history calls this attack a stunning victory for the Japanese. But was it?
Tactically looking at Pearl Harbor, it was very successful. Strategically looking at Pearl Harbor, it was a disaster.
And most important, could what happened at Pearl Harbor happen again? Harbor's Remembrance Circle, those who died that day are listed. But look closely. In this roll of honor are pilots who served on the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise. But the Enterprise, in fact, all American aircraft carriers, weren't even in Pearl Harbor that morning. Then how were these aviators killed? This brings up another myth. Were the Japanese responsible for all of the American deaths on December 7th? War is not only hell, it is chaos. And December 7th was no different. Many Americans were in the wrong place at the wrong time. At 9:10 p.m., 13 hours after the attack, as the USS Enterprise was returning to port, 6 of her fighters were dispatched to Pearl Harbor's Ford Island. 26-year-old Jim Daniels was in one of those fighters. What Jim and his fellow pilots didn't know was at this time, the defenders were waiting.
Every gun in Pearl Harbor, every gun in every ship, every gun in every revetment started shooting at us. 6 of us in the aircraft. They shot down 5 of us. They killed 3 of us that night, and 1 died later. So there were only 2 of us that got down.
These planes were shot down for a logical, although tragic, reason. Everybody expected another Japanese attack.
It's important to remember that the attack on Pearl Harbor came in 2 waves. The first at 7:40 and the second just before 9 o'clock. By 10 a.m., the second wave attack was over and Pearl Harbor was no longer asleep. Our guns were now pointing in the right direction. But Pearl Harbor was still vulnerable, and on the decks of the Japanese carriers, the pilots readied for the 3rd strike.
As devastating as the attack on Pearl Harbor was, it could have been much worse. Although the U.S. Pacific Fleet was shattered, Admiral Nagumo, the commander of the Japanese task force, had failed to strike a fatal blow. His primary targets, the American aircraft carriers, were not in port at the time of the attack.
One would have to say that having the two aircraft